Hey guys, it's Dr. Ryan, and today we're going to talk a little bit about an interesting article that was published recently talking about alcohol consumption and cardiovascular risk. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. So, one thing that is a little controversial about alcohol consumption is that there is a little bit of a discrepancy in the medical community of whether or not alcohol use is or alcohol um, drinking alcohol and imbibing alcohol is beneficial or on the whole an overall negative. And so articles like this, and this is just a clickbait medical article, I guess it was in 2013, suggested that alcohol can actually be quite healthy. It mentioned it can lower your risk of cardiovascular disease, lengthen your life, improve your libido, prevent against common cold. Whereas, there's many other articles that maybe suggest the complete opposite. For example, this article here suggests that alcohol disrupts sleep homeostasis. Alcoholics, both during by drinking during drinking periods, during abstinence, suffer from a multitude of sleep disruptions manifested by profound insomnia, excessive daytime sleepiness, and altered sleep architecture. That doesn't sound like it helps your sleep. Alcohol abuse suppresses multiple arms of the immune system, leading to an increased risk of infection. This is an article in Alcohol Research and Health, 2010. It's a review article. And then alcohol and reproductive function. Well, in terms of libido, that is kind of plus or minus. We do know that it certainly impacts the reproductive system. It produces significant spermatozoal morphologic changes involving breakage of the sperm head, distension in the midsection, curling of the tail. We know that it decreases plasma testosterone levels, and that obviously does not really improve libido, at least in males. And it seems to inhibit ovulation and reduce estrogen and progesterone, at least in animal studies. So that kind of contradicts what certain conventional knowledge might state. Well, there was a recent article that was done over at Massachusetts General Hospital, and basically it was a combination. It was a collaboration between two centers, and it looked at habitual alcohol intake with risk of cardiovascular disease. And this is also a bit controversial because there is a contingent of individuals that feel, well, hey, a couple glasses of wine a night, or anywhere, or maybe like a glass of wine a night, probably is going to be somewhat beneficial, or certainly won't hurt your cardiovascular risk, or increase your risk for developing cardiovascular disease. And there is some evidence to suggest that certain aspects of red wine, like certain compounds found within red wine, like resveratrol, which is an antioxidant, may be cardioprotective. But this article kind of suggests that maybe that's not true. So again, this was published in 2022. Let's take a look at it here. The main overview of the article was to determine what is the true risk of cardiovascular disease associated with differing amounts of habitual alcohol consumption. And it was a really large cohort study, over 400,000 people. And what they found as a whole was that there was a nonlinear, consistently risk increasing association between all amounts of alcohol consumption and both hypertension and coronary artery disease. And the increases were smaller in individuals who had light alcohol intake, but exponentially greater increases in those who had higher levels of consumption. And so let's do a little deeper dive into what that actually was. So again, it was a team that was led at researchers at both MGH and the Broad Institute at MIT and Harvard. And they looked at 371,463 adults. These are adults who were participating in the UK Biobank. We'll talk about what that is. And they had an average age of 57 years and an average alcohol consumption of 10 drinks a week. And the UK Biobank is unique in that it's a large database that contains in-depth genetic and health information. This will be important in just a bit because they actually utilize this information to look at associations. So they used a fairly complex form of data analysis called Mendelian randomization, in which they actually use genetic variants, so single nucleotide polymorphisms that were associated with alcoholism, to determine whether an observed link between exposure and outcome was consistent with the causal effect. So in other words, whether or not light alcohol consumption might cause someone to be protected from cardiovascular disease, or heavy alcohol consumption might worsen it. And they're able to have a pretty rigorous data study with that. And they looked at utilizing this process. They looked at multiple associations between alcohol consumption and cardiovascular disease, hypertension, coronary artery disease, myocardial infarction, stroke, heart failure, atrial fibrillation. And it was conducted between July 2019 and January 2022. And so just to give you an idea of what I mean by single nucleotide polymorphism, so just very basically, in your DNA, you have these base pairs, which kind of correspond to the rungs of the ladder of the double-stranded, the double-stranded carbohydrate chains, in addition to the base pairs of the purines and the pyrimidines right here. And so in certain individuals, so there's a typical sequence of these. So as you can see, adenine typically binds with thymine, and guanine typically binds with cytosine. And you'll have like a sequence of these. Sometimes there is a single nucleotide polymorphism. So where there should be an adenine and thymine base pair, there's instead a guanine and cytosine base pair. And so many times these single nucleotide polymorphisms are associated with certain disease traits, or particular diseases, or predilections for diseases. And that's what these researchers looked at. Okay, so what are the results of the study? So again, we talked about what the study included. What they found was that light to moderate alcohol consumption was associated with healthier lifestyle factors, which is, to be expected. But what they found was that that was really what seemed to attenuate the risk of cardiovascular disease. So in other words, it was more so the fact that these individuals who engaged in light to moderate alcohol consumption also generally exercise that seemed to provide the benefit more so than the actual alcohol themselves. What they did find was if you had a 1 standard deviation increase in genetically predicted alcohol consumption, it was associated with a 1.3 times increased risk of high blood pressure, hypertension, and 1.4 times increased risk of coronary artery disease. And light alcohol intake was associated with minimal increase, although it wasn't associated with an increase in cardiovascular disease, whereas heavier consumption was associated with an exponential, it wasn't linear, it was an exponential increase in both clinical and subclinical cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, arrhythmias, AFib, heart failure, etc. And so when they kind of looked at all that data, some of the main things they came away with was that we kind of alluded to, the cardioprotective effects of light to moderate alcohol consumption are probably secondary to the lifestyle factors of those individuals who engage in light to moderate alcohol consumption, namely exercise. And it appears, at least based on this study, that there is no amount of alcohol, the researchers seem to claim that there is no amount of alcohol that's protective against cardiovascular disease, and that adverse effects of alcohol seem to significantly, exponentially, unduly affect the individuals who drink heavily, in that their risk of cardiovascular disease exponentially increases significantly more than those who drink minimally. And then, of course, the overarching conclusion of the study was that as opposed to what was thought in the past, that, hey, one drink a night, 1 or 2 drinks a night might be cardioprotective, that is probably not true. And that in most cases, the individuals that only drink lightly, many times they have other aspects of their lifestyle that are linked to a lower cardiovascular risk. So hopefully that was an interesting study. I myself am a teetotaler, in that I don't consume alcohol, but many of my patients do, and maybe it will give you guys some food for thought in terms of how healthy that drink is. Again, for my patients, I don't even though I follow that lifestyle, I don't encourage that, don't mandate that they do. I just suggest that if they do drink, maybe limit it to like 1 or 2 drinks over the weekend. Recognize that you're really not doing it for your health. It's more of a pleasure thing. Okay, well, hopefully this has been helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.